Hello and welcome, guys. LFM is going into its 11th season. Believe it or not, feels like yesterday, but we're already, 100 weeks into their lifetime. It's incredible. They have chosen a new track for new users to acquire the license. And again, it's an honor for me to be the chosen one by the LFM staff to do the track guide in order for you to have it a little bit easier and acquire the license faster. So back on Brands Hatch, where we did have the license guide before, so there's one online already, but I want to do a few things a bit differently this time, also because we now have the Popometer software, which didn't exist back then, which for those who don't know, Popometer is a software made that is about allowing you to, well, yes, you can buy the setup, but it's all about you being able to compare your driving, your inputs, your steering, your pedals, your speed, your position on the track to the professional players of the game. And the benefit really lies in that you can take a step back. You don't have to watch a replay back and forth. Of course you can, but you can take a step back and really get a precise look and really get an idea how different you are actually driving, because this is something I think that a lot of beginner drivers are actually getting wrong. They do think they do all the right stuff. They come from the outside, they go to the inside, they carry the right speed, they accelerate and brake at the same point. But if you take a closer look, it will become very clear to you. And don't underestimate that there will be major differences in literally everything you do. You're going to brake earlier or later. You're going to brake harsher or weaker. You're going to carry more or less speed into the corners. You're going to have the slowest speed at a different point. You're going to have the tightest point at a different point. And there are so many differences that you can go through. And this video will be designed to help you figure these things out. Okay. So what I did for that is I've recently built a Porsche setup for this track. And I know the Porsche is a very liked car, loved car, a classic. And I managed to really tame it from a setup perspective and make it really drivable. So I want to use this data pack and the labs within that, including the setups, for you to do the same thing that I did. Okay. And the Porsche is a very special car. And I write a lot about that in these data packs. You can just go there and look at it yourself. But what I would just want to say is that the Porsche is a much nicer to drive car if you use the race setup. And therefore, we're also going to look at the race lap, which is definitely a bit slower than the qualifying lap, of course, but it's so much nicer to drive that I think there's more benefit for people acquiring their license that they put a bit of fuel in the car, because the Porsche does have the engine in the back, as we know, and well, because we can fly anywhere, we can just look where the motor is, and it doesn't have any. Well, unlucky. The other thing is, the Porsche does have the fuel tank in the front, and while we can fly around here, I don't think we can actually see it. But the thing then always is, if the tank is empty, the Porsche will be very heavy here in the back, right? If that's an Amboss or something, and that has, I don't know, 1,000 kilograms, doesn't actually matter the number. While at the front, there's no weight at all. Okay, and this makes the car very imbalanced in qualifying trim, and the front has all the options to go in any direction, anytime, very responsive. You can go there and can go there, and whenever you turn the wheel, it's going to change direction. And the rear end will always be overwhelmed a bit and just step out in any direction where you're, well, the opposite direction actually, that you're trying to drive the car. So what we are doing is we move part of this weight back into the front. And that's probably already one of the all-time best paintings in Simracing, to balance out this weight issue that the car has. Okay, I'm massively overdoing it here with the numbers, but just for you to get an idea why we are choosing the race setup. And that is simply because the car is much more balanced, because there's also weight in the front, and makes the car much more pleasing and in the end easier to drive, which I think is very good for you to acquire the license. The time you need to achieve is always like something 5 seconds off of what the possible time is. So this is probably not the main concern you should have. The main concern you should have for the license is to get a drivable car. So let's maybe find out how we do that. I will play the full lap at the end of the video and we'll go corner by corner right now. So let's assume we've got the data pack. We open the lap just by clicking on that, and then you'll get to this view and you'll have your speed trace, which just shows you how fast and where you're going, how fast. Then you get your brake and throttle inputs right next to that, red being the brake, green being the throttle. And then we have the steering here in blue. Just note that the 0 line here always moves a bit to kind of extend the scale and show a bit more detail. You can see the gearing, and we have the ABS, for example. Everything else should probably not worry you too much and is just part of the subscription features of the website. For now, everything you need to worry about is the things that you can really change, and that is all the inputs that you can do, which is the pedals, the steering, and the gear. So this is what we're going to focus on. Let's the car roll through the last corner and pick up speed for a quick lap. It always makes sense to go a bit short here, but for us right now, that doesn't really matter. It's all about kind of getting an idea of how to do this track in the first place. And it's very windy. A grip is there, but very often you will not actually see the corner. So you'll have to find different points on the track with which you're working to orientate yourself to find braking points and position the car. And you can see I'm already gravitating towards the outside of the track, doing 232 at this point, and that I just try to see to find where we are right now in the data. So this is pretty much here, okay? This is where we are right now in the replay. So if we go closer, you can see, okay, the car is on the outside of the track. Now the issue is with that corner, eventually you would say the corner is here. The problem is there is already a radius all the time on the outside here. And that makes it really, really tricky. Because most of the time, as I'm right now, I'm already on the outside here. And I have to make sure that I'm not clipping the grass on the left side, right? It's funny that there's a braking board. Let's see how good it compares. The thing is, when your attention is focusing on that white line because it's threatening the car to go onto the grass, and that usually means you're spinning, that binds your attention and you will never kind of try to find that apex, or once you do, it is going to be very late. And the later you try to search the apex, the less time you have for that, the more unlikely it is you actually will. So we need to find a way that we don't have to worry about that white line here on the left. And one very simple way would just be, and I'm doing this to some degree, of course I'm more comfortable with the whole thing and more experienced, but you can see I'm kind of doing a shortcut here. So let's try to mark a few points here. Here's a bit of a corner. And here's a bit of a corner. And what I'm trying to tell you or show you is that I'm almost like going a bit away from the white line, and then I'm kind of driving a straight line up until that turn-in point over here, which means in this whole area from here to here, I don't really have to worry about the white line, which allows me to get or to focus my attention on the inside of the corner instead and adjust my speed and turning point accordingly. So the first job you have is to not be threatened by the white line on the edge of the track here, right? You're just trying to take somewhat as a beginner, right? As a pro, you want to drive along the white line as close as you can because there's more lap time with a wider turn in. But as a beginner, we're not looking for the last hundreds or thousands or even tenth. We're just looking to get the license here. So what you're going to do is you build somewhat of a straight line that gravitates toward the outside much later here, right? Don't overdo it. just to get the rough idea, stay away from the white line so it doesn't threaten you. And if it doesn't threaten you, you can focus your attention much better on the apex, which makes it more likely and easier to actually drive that corner. That's the first thing. The next task for you will be to manage that braking zone. If we look at the data, you can see middle of the corner, we are still doing something 140, 150. You're probably going to be a tiny bit slower, but it's still a reasonably fast corner, which means downforce is playing a huge role. Downforce always is very tricky on race cars like that. And what happens to the Porsche once we go onto the brake is, I have to plant these concepts in your head right now. Once we hit the brake, the front goes closer to the ground and the rear comes up a bit, right? You know this from your road car, but your road car does not have aerodynamics. The issue is the closer the front is to the ground, the more downforce it produces. The higher the rear is up in the air, roughly, and it's not the same for every car, and there's a range where it might be different, but generally speaking, that produces suddenly less downforce on the rear, which makes the car very sensitive under braking. So just keep that in mind for a second, okay? When the car is sensitive, we do not want to turn, okay? So we only really want to turn into the corner or really commit to the corner once that situation has stopped and the car is, let's say, neutral again, right? No plus or minus on both axles, just back to the setup how it is designed. Of course, there's also part of the setup design that defines how much the plus on the front is. You can have a setup that produces much more downforce, and you can have a setup that produces only tiny bits of extra downforce. And the same is true for the rear. You can set the car up in a way that it produces more on the front, less on the rear in those situations where you're braking. And of course, for this setup, I have been trying to minimize all these effects so that the car remains easier to drive, but you will still feel that effect to some degree. And what you'll feel while driving usually is that the rear end becomes a bit loose, and the car likes to rotate a bit too much into the corner. So just keep that in mind. We're trying to drive the car a bit straight and have a straight braking zone where we are not turning because the car is rather sensitive in this situation. And additional information for that is the harder you brake, the more the car will pitch forward, the bigger the effect of the imbalance is going to be. So what I'm doing here with the brake is A, I'm reducing the speed, but B, I'm also managing how much I pitch the car forward and how much of that aerodynamic shift I'm getting in the braking zone. Okay, so your brake is more than a means of slowing down the car. It's also a means of controlling the balance you have in the braking zone. So when the car is really oversteery and very hard to manage for you, in high-speed situations, maybe the only thing you want to do is actually just get off the brake and the car will stabilize and will be much more likely to go into the corner in a way that you can control it. Okay. Now, let's roll it forward a bit in slow motion to talk about what I have been trying to say. So, straightening out the car as good as I can, braking across that part here. And you can see already how on the brake the steering is very neutral and the rear rotates kind of automatically. And that is exactly the effect I was just describing. So don't be afraid of that. That is part of the design. This is part of what the car should behave like. And your way to control the situation really is to be very careful in the steering, be neutral, be ready to counter steer, and remove the brake if it gets too much and rather just roll instead. Okay, try to brake in a straight line. That's the important part, and only turn in when you're off the brake and the car has settled in a neutral position. Then the next point for analysis for you is going to be, where is the car the tightest in a corner and where is the car the slowest in a corner? And this is one of the, you would say, well, this is pretty normal, but actually this is a very rare situation where we will have the slowest point in the corner. So where the speed trace here on top is the lowest, that's where the slowest point is, of course, is also the tightest point in the corner, right? And this is actually very rare. So we're going to make a marker here for the tightest point in the corner, and we're going to make a blue marker for the slowest point in the corner. In this particular situation, this is a match. And from that point onwards, once you're fully on the inside, once you're the slowest in that corner, you pin the throttle down quite aggressively, even though I give the car a bit of time here just to not lift the nose up too roughly and get understeer. And for you, you can just wait a little longer, no problem at all. Again, we're not looking for you to do a world record, just to get the license. And if you take your time, it doesn't really matter. The important bit is that you're not running into the sand, because that costs way more time than anything else you can do wrong. Then, coming down this hill, again, there will be a situation pretty much here where the car's rather light, and you just have to really wait and the car comes down the hill. And then here, once the slope changes, the car will grip up so much. And even if it feels like you're not making the corner, suddenly the front tires will bite and will keep you on the track. The other part is, and that will be, well, maybe that's a second or third lesson by now, you need to figure out how much track the game allows you to use, right? And even if we are across the white line here with all 4 tires, this is still valid. And I think you can even run into the sand here while keeping the lap valid. So don't worry about that here in this situation. Right, I had to shut the door. Let's move on. For the second corner, then the track limits might already be different, and it might be different for turn 3, turn 4, and so on. So this is a task you really need to figure out, because there's so much lap time in using the full amount of the track. This is the easiest way you will gain lap time to really use everything the game allows you to drive on. Moving forward to the hairpin. So the first hairpin here, the braking marker, you can see where the brake lights go on. This is pretty much before the bridge, and in the cockpit it will pretty much look like you are about to clip the shadow already. So you could tell when the shadow just about hits your, well, wiper or whatever is lying there, or the bonnet, or the edge of the bonnet, or edge of your cockpit, whatever you want to call it, when it disappears behind the car in the cockpit view. This is when you want to slam the brake. And now, just because you're a beginner, you just add 1 or 2 meters to that, right? So you brake a tiny bit earlier, and I really mean tiny. Let me go to the top view just to indicate how much we really mean. So let's, as a reference, I think we'd not be wrong to take the wall there where it turns red. And if that is the point where I reach the maximum braking, if I tell you as a beginner to take it a tiny bit easier, I don't want you to brake here. This would be way too much. You'd park before the corner. 10 meters is a lot of space on a racetrack. We want to make a tiny adjustment, and you would probably already be fine braking here instead. Half a car length, maximum a car length is going to make so much of a difference that it will allow you to make tons of mistakes in approaching towards the corner, and you'll still easily make it. Okay, so if you go to whatever professional you're driving, whatever YouTube video you're watching, don't just copy the braking point, because it's going to be very difficult to use that. Just dial it back ever so slightly. Again, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 meters is going to be more than enough, really, to make any corner. Most of the corners. Not that confident with that statement. Okay. And now we get a kind of new style of corner, which is a very long corner. Let's go out of here, and you can see this is a perfect 180-degree corner. And how I'm going to describe this is a rule of thumb. The longer the corner is and the slower the corner is, the more likely we will see a new driving line, which is then defined as a double apex, which means we will have the car on the inside once, and we will likely have the car on the inside twice. And in between, it is very likely that the car is going to be slightly further away. Usually, and now there's the separation that wasn't one in the first corner, we'll have an apex here, an apex there, and we'll have the slowest point in the corner somewhere in the middle. We'll check in the data in a second how it really looks. But just so you know the concept, a double apex means the car is going to be tight, it's going to run wide, and it's going to be tight once more. So if we move to our tool, and maybe I should turn the view around just so we're matching that. Tiny bit more, huh? You can see, even though it's ever so slightly, that there is a first apex where I'm the most through the inside and I'm on the inside again a second time. And somewhere in the middle of the corner, I'm a bit further away from the inside. And there I'm also the slowest. Of course, I am the slowest before I pick up the throttle, which is the green stuff here. So this is going to be the slowest point in that corner, which is not much, but a tiny bit further away than both apexes are. And until the slowest point in the corner, you will also be slowing down, which you can see with this brake trace here, okay? And just for you to get a rough idea how much this trail braking is that you might have already heard about, roughly half or more, or maybe even 2/3 of the entire braking zone is me not braking 100%. And that is a key information that will often appear to you, especially when you already start to turn in, which we're doing here, right? The car is coming to the inside already. As soon as you turn the steering wheel, you want to kind of start the trail braking, almost, right? There's a bit of overlap here with a bit of steering and still full braking. But as a rule of thumb, as soon as you're requesting grip from the front end to turn the car, you need to give up that grip from the brakes. Else the car just can't do it. There's only so much grip available and you're trying to use more than everything if you press the brake fully and try to steer. So you need to choose either or. Okay, so we're braking post or past that first apex up until the middle of the turn, where we're going to be the slowest and slightly further away. And then we start accelerating quite aggressively to force the rear around and actually get to that second apex. For you, again, you can leave yourself more room. Your exit doesn't have to be, your apex doesn't have to be as pronounced here, doesn't have to be as pronounced here. Your slow speed can be in a slightly different position. It can be more, it can be less than for me. But the main thing I want you to try is be tight once, go wide once, go tight again. That's the important bit. Try to copy that. And even if you don't nail it, it's still going to be quick, because that second apex in the end, that's going to allow you to accelerate quite quickly from the corner and not lose too much time on the straight, which is, I didn't count, probably less than 5 by now. Most people will lose time on the straights because they're exiting the corner the wrong way. And everybody and their mom, you kind of has that tendency to brake too aggressive for the corner, try to be really quick in the corner, but then their car ends up somewhere here, and then they have to wait forever to put the power down, and on the straight they're going to be 20 kilometers slower, and that costs you 2 seconds right there. No chance forever to get the license. So make sure you have good exits over anything else. So let's watch how it looks from inside the cockpit. I'll go back a bit and slow it down. Braking just as we arrive at the shadow, tiny bit before. Again, leave yourself more room. Trailing the brakes now. Going past that first apex. The car now goes wide a bit again, right? You can see the white line goes away from us. And now we're slow. We put the power down. The white line comes back to us. That's the second apex there. Tiny correction. But now the car is really, really straight for the straight ahead, which means we can build a lot of speed without the rear tires losing grip. And that speed, this is what gives you the lap time. The exit speed and speed on the straight is the most important bit. Next thing, Brands Hatch, really technical track, corner after corner. You really have to be aggressive in the transition from turn 2 to turn 3. So what I mean is this aggressive swing here, right? Don't ever get lazy here, because as soon as you get lazy, you'll not make it to the right side of the track, and then you'll not have a wide entry, and then you'll not have a fast corner, and you'll not have a fast exit. And that means you're going to lose time, and you lose time, and you lose more time. So the next important bit is be aggressive, so to say, in this zone and reposition the car rather quickly. Don't pause. Don't try to get a breather. Just reposition, go over to the right side and prepare for that corner. Preparation, I mean, is you want to be very far to the outside and you want to be kind of parallel to the braking zone here. That is not parallel. Let's try again. That's more parallel. Because same thing as in turn 1. As soon as you're driving parallel to the outside line, you cannot accidentally clip the grass, right? If you're traveling the same direction as the white line does, there's no chance whatsoever it's going to catch you off guard, right? So that is the whole idea behind switching sides here very aggressively. And you can make it even more pronounced, right? You can go all the way this way, and then you're perfectly straight for the braking, and you don't have to worry about this line on the outside here at all, and can only focus your attention on where's the corner, where's the apex. So let's look in the car what I mean. Again, I'm a bit lazy here because for me, it is a bit easier to, because I've done so many laps here, I can still position myself to the outside while already rotating. But I'm fairly sure that for beginners especially, it's much easier to position earlier and just brake in a straight line, because that makes the car much more predictable and doesn't bind your attention in making sure you're not running into the grass here on the side. Okay, so try to be parallel with this outside curb. And then I think, what is the braking marker here? Let's try to see something. I think it's pretty much when the curb starts. But again, this is the perception while driving. Actually, when we look right now where I'm applying the brake, there's a fair bit of a distance to that curb. And if we just look to the right side, interesting, there's a board as well that I hardly ever see because my eyes are already focused on the apex here. That's why I never really have time to find that board or the orange marker on the wall there, but both can give you orientation and might work for you to find and figure out a braking point here. And then again, no worries, just brake a tiny bit earlier and just make a half car length or full car length adjustment to my braking point, and that will already in most cases sort you out completely in terms of speed for that corner. Okay, don't try to be the hero into the corner, it will cost you speed on the exit. That's the most important lesson I can give you. Make sure you get good exit, which means enter the corner a tiny bit slower just to ensure that exit. So when you now brake in a straight line, and we can probably see this here better, switching to turn 3 now, you can see there's only a very short, and actually I'm never reaching 100% brake input here, okay? Never 100% brake input, which means I'm kind of always trail braking in this situation. There's never full braking. Probably if we look at another lap of mine, I just might, because it's pretty close here, okay? But just so you get the idea, you don't have to brake like an absolute donkey all the time, okay? The car will slow down anyway, but the more subtle you brake, or with less braking you get away, the more controllable the car will be, the less drastic changes in behavior the car will have, and it should hopefully make your life easier. In the end, we just want to get the license, not the world record here. Okay, so a kind of decisive dash on the brake and then trailing off a bit. And then same for me, I do make adjustments. I never really perfectly hit the right speed at first attempt or whatever. So you can see I'm rolling a bit, and then I find going for the corner here, slow down a bit, hard initial braking, car rotating, and you can see a tiny bit of a correction there. Not quite counter steering, but just getting neutral because the rear tries to do its thing, and then just correcting that, then committing for the corner once more as I release the brake and bring the car back in a neutral state. And then once the car is in that neutral state, I commit to the corner, and now I test, will I actually make that apex? Not so sure. So I'm completely focused with my eyes on these 3 pillars, bollards, don't know the name. And just check, okay, is the car going where I want it to be? And if I'm too fast, tiny dash on the brake. If I'm too slow, tiny dash on the throttle. And really, we're talking tiny corrections here, okay? This is a 15% brake input or something like that for not even a tenth or something. So very, very tiny adjustment in speed just to bring the car a tiny bit further to the inside. And then just wait a bit. And once you feel, okay, I'm making that apex, that's the time when you want to pick up the throttle. And first, you see, I'm kind of pausing here with the throttle, right? I'm going up and then pausing here. This stabilizes the car. I don't want to release all the power just yet. This stabilizes the car, brings the weight back to the rear tires, helps them grip up. And once that has happened, we're talking 2-3 tenths here or something, then you can go into the power all the way. Okay? The curb is a bit upsetting on the inside, so that's where this technique, so to say, just going 70-80% throttle or something, holding it there for a second, let the car stabilize, and then put the power down entirely. Next thing is, how much track does the game give you here? And it's plenty. And again, we can put the inside tires way behind the white line. And this is just where a lot of lap time lies, if you know how far to the outside you can go. And if we go a little closer to the ground here, you can also see this isn't actually grass. This is something you'd put in your garden or garage or whatever you want to call it. So this is solid ground here up until quite far into the grass, where you'd at some point get an off track. I think the edges here are the curb, but it's not the white line. So make sure you use that track, because that's an infinite amount of time. Next corner again, and now you really start to get a feeling for what are corners like in Branched Hatch. You never really have straight lines for braking. The corner always kind of already starts trying to make your life miserable. And your task is to kind of build your own straight lines into the track in order to have somewhat of a stable car. Now, in this corner, we're learning a new approach to a corner. We've had first corner an apex in the middle of the corner. Then in turn 2 we had a double apex. Turn 3 again I think was more traditional again, with the apex in the middle of the corner. And now we have a very long corner ahead of us with a long straight following afterwards, and also going uphill on the exit. So what we're trying to achieve is a lot of exit speed. So what we're doing here then instead, is now we're talking about turn 4, is we are aiming for a single late apex, right? So this would be like the middle of the corner, a traditional apex, so to say. Then you could have a double apex, which doesn't really seem to make sense here, right? That line is very weird. Doesn't really make a lot of sense here. So what we're trying to do is one late apex. Okay, let's halve the corner somewhere here. I'm just trying to tell you that you want to come to the inside. You want to delay coming to the inside until the last third or last quarter of the corner. This is where you really want to be on the inside, because again, similar to turn 2, the car will now be much more straight for the exit, which allows the tires to convert the throttle position into actual speed. If you do a line that is very different to that, say you're going a bit too tight and you have an apex here or something, and then you go wide here, then now you have to still make all the corner in the very late stages here, and wait and wait and wait and wait until you can put down the power, and then you're accelerating from here and not accelerating from where I was already here. And then down the straight, you're going to be 20 kilometers down or more, and you're losing tons of time. So make sure the exit is the most important thing. Get the speed out of the corner rather than into it. And in this case, delay the apex. You can see again in the braking trace, hardly or just a very short period of time, I'll be maximum braking, and then immediately going back to the trail braking and extending the braking zone very far and deep into the corner. And again, like the corner before, I even stop in between and brake a bit again, just to correct the speed further. So you don't always have to have this perfect arch or something, right? It's just not reality, just not how it's going to look in this game. And so don't worry if your throttle and brake shapes don't look like the prototype you will find online or something. No worries at all. It's fine to do corrections. The pros do corrections as well. Okay. So driving then, on the very outside here, still full throttle. Let's find where the braking starts for me. It's pretty much right here where I stopped the video. And on the outside, you'll see this orange marker again, which you can use to get orientation and then kind of act towards that orange board. You probably still want to see it on the side here, just brake a tiny bit earlier. The important bit in training for you is don't kind of get tricked into turning in just because your speed allows us. Try to keep the car wide and go very deep, very far into the corner, right? You see how I'm struggling with my own brain here to force myself to stay wide. It's not easy to do that, to still stay wide. It's something you have to repeat in your head over and over and over. And only once I feel, okay, I can see the exit now, and not quite even, right? I just know there is an edge on the inside curb that I want to hit. That is my apex here. That's why I want to be the tightest. And there I already want to have the power down and build speed. The other bit is, I don't think we can see this too well here. Maybe if we zoom in a little, that usually helps. Depth controls. No, sorry. Here we zoom in a bit. And see this all? It's tricky to see. What I want to tell you is, though, the track is quite bumpy here, even if I can't quite just get it into the camera. The track is very bumpy. And if I just put the power down completely, I will overwhelm the car. And that is why in the throttle trace, you'll see this long hesitation here with 80% of throttle roughly applied, just waiting until I can really open the steering wheel. That's what you can see down here, right? Very steady steering angle into the corner. Saturate what the front axle can do, and then you have something less to worry about. Then your only thing you can change in the corner to adjust the line, adjust where your car is placed, should be the speed, right? And if you notice, okay, I'm wide, I want to get more to the inside, I need to change my speed. So you hit the brake a tiny bit, reduce the speed, the car will drive a tighter line. But I'm not changing much on the steering here, right? The steering is maximized. I'm using everything the front tires can give me. And I'm only adjusting my speed, okay? Then onto the power, still same steering angle, waiting for the car to start accelerating. And then when I see, okay, this is the exit now, I can see it, I can stop turning. When I open the steering wheel, this is when I can release the full power, because then I allow the rear tires to actually convert it. So it's the same thing as on the braking. You can't have everything at once. If you accelerate fully, you can't turn a lot. If you brake fully, you can't turn a lot. And if you turn a lot, you can't brake a lot or accelerate a lot. That makes sense, hopefully. See here right now, I get the feeling, okay, I can see the exit now. This is roughly the rotation I can still manage with the power fully down, and then just be aware that the rear end might be a bit squiggly here still because of the bumps. There's another one, and I usually use that bump to do the upshift, right? Because going over this bump will likely force the RPM to hit the rev limiter and the car stops accelerating. And if I then later do the upshift, I will stop accelerating again for a split second. So I'm just trying to match those two things, shifting up over the bump and then kind of saving myself one occasion where the car isn't accelerating. But for now, for you, shouldn't matter too much. Fly along the straight, shift point, just aim for roughly 9,000 RPM in the Porsche. That should be fine. And now we come to another very tricky corner, as there are quite many of on Brands Hatch. First time though, we have a properly straight braking line, and that makes our life quite a bit easier. Even though you can see, again, I'm not braking 100% here because, well, we don't really need it, and it exaggerates certain behaviors of the car that we don't want to see. So hard dash on the brake. Let's try to find a reference here. I'm always looking at the floor, to be honest. Let me change the camera. I'm mostly looking at the floor where it gets a bit darker, but it's also much of a feeling thing. What you can use, again, there is markers on the left side of the track. So shortly after the board with the 2 dashes or just the orange, if someone takes that out, you still have the orange on the wall that you can use as a rough reference, but you can tell it's quite a bit after that. There would be another reference on the other side of the track, which is still ahead of the car as I'm hitting the brake. So let me actually go back a second here. You could see on the right side, the orange thing arrives, and as soon as it kind of vanishes from the screen, boom, I start the braking. So that could be a reference you can use. Now we have the issue, we have to turn into this corner under braking, most likely. You can always do it a tiny bit earlier, right? So you have less overlap of turning and braking where the car is very sensitive. I, as well, someone very experienced on the game, of course, I can brake and turn in at the same time with the rear a tiny bit loose on entry. And it's all fine. It's not too pronounced in the setup. You might get the hang of it, and then you can use it to your advantage. And you really turn in the car on the brake, and that is really what it means. You pitch the car forward, you change the aerodynamic balance as I've showed before the first corner, and that starts rotating the car with almost no steering angle applied here, right? So there's neutral, neutral, tiny bit of a turn in, onto the brake, the car immediately starts stepping out with the rear, and my steering becomes neutral again. And at the same time, I am going out of the brake to allow the car to grip up again, for the rear to settle, for the front to lose its additional downforce, and the car goes back in a more neutral state. And this is then when I commit to more steering. And then same thing again, because it's very tricky to handle this entire transition into the corner. It is tricky for me as well. Again, I'm happy now that the car is stable, and then I check my speed, and then I'll notice, do I make it to the inside or do I not? And if I not, I'll just brake a tiny bit again, bring down the speed, bring the car further to the inside, and then change my line and direction that way. You can see the same thing, maxing out the steering now here and just keeping it stable for quite some time. So the key for you really is to work around the situation where the car is sensitive. So what you can do is to bring the braking and steering further apart, be done with the braking 5 meters earlier or something, which means you start 5 meters early, and that's already enough of an adjustment. And then steer in to the corner once the car is stabilized as you're off the brake. And sometimes you'll need a bit of throttle as well to stabilize it further or keep the speed up, because of course, if you brake earlier, you might find yourself on the inside a bit too early. But what you want to make sure is in that corner, it's close, but I feel it is also a slightly late apex. If we half the corner, I wonder if I'm betraying myself here. I think if we're honest, there is the apex in the middle of the corner, but you can see the slowest point of the corner is, it's matching that. So it's pretty similar to turn 1, where we have the slowest point in the corner and the tightest point in the corner in the same position of the track. So up until the apex, you're slowing down, and from the apex, you're accelerating up again. And as we've seen in other corners, that is not the norm, so to say. Or not always the case, say the least. Then going forward, so slowing down up until the inside here, letting the car roll forward a tiny bit, but immediately back onto the power. And that brings the car wide. And now the next thing about Brands Hatch here again is a lot of track you can use. It will still keep the lap valid if you go over the white line, and only the inside tires need to kind of stay on the tarmac. It's fine, so don't be too afraid. Just don't have too much steering angle applied if you use a bit of the grass on the exit here, and keep the throttle pin down. That's the important bit. Going for the next corner, not much time to breathe. Very tricky to find the braking point here. I'm just starting. Again, you could orientate yourself towards when this orange board disappears behind your air pillar. Always depends a bit on your settings of the view, right? You could use it on the right side too, wherever you want to look, or you just look at the whiteboard and kind of act accordingly to that. Good thing here is, again, we have a straight braking zone, so it should be quite easy to not run into the grass under braking. Maybe you leave yourself a bit bigger of a gap than I have here to the grass just to be safe. And then again, same thing with the braking, just a very short period of time where I'm actually fully on the brake. Then there's a bit of trailing, and then I'm almost completely off the brake and only reducing tiny bits of speed here in the end for the car to slowly make it more towards the inside. With speed decreasing, my radius gets tighter and the car will go towards the curb here. You can already see a bit here how much curb we're actually using, but you'll see in the replay a bit better in a second. And you can also see that I do have this tiny bit of an oversteering moment here after the initial turn-in, just because how sensitive the car is in this situation, right? So just be sure when you turn in with hard braking at high speed, the rear end will get loose. That's not a problem. You just have to be ready for it. Go back neutral in the steering, maybe a tiny bit of counter steer. Don't be scared of that. As soon as you go off the brake, the car will stabilize again, and it shouldn't be too much of an issue anymore. So, hard braking straight, bit of a turn in. Now the rear comes around, tiny bit of counter steer. And you can see with the counter steer, I was removing the brake a bit, right? This is what happens here. Counter steering, off the brake, reducing the pitch, allowing the rear tires to settle a bit again. Car stabilizes, and then we can commit to the steering again while we're still losing some speed. The car will stabilize further, and we can commit to ever more steering going for the corner. And now just keep the brake, trailing, just to reduce the speed and force the front to the inside of the turn. And now you can see where there's a lot of time buried again, just clipping a lot of that curb, and it will allow you pretty much again having the outside tires behind the white line. So quite a lot. The only important bit is now that half the car is in the grass, make sure to stabilize the car with quite a good amount of throttle applied, just not fully, okay? Full throttle only on tarmac, not over grass. So just a bit of throttle here stabilizing the car, but not fully. And then once you're off the grass again, you can put the power down completely. Same thing on the exit. Have to find out how much track the game really gives you. This is still valid. I think you can use even more. So it's again inside tires this time around. Behind the white line, I think there's even a bit more edge of the curb probably. And then we're coming to, I think, one of the most tricky parts on the track. And typical issue is, and you can see where the ideal line is painted, where the black line is going, and it's very easy to fall for it and also take the short line here. But you can see I'm driving on the outside all the time already, and I think it is again better to see here in the telemetry. So it would have been very easy for me to just fall for where the black line is painted and just take the short line here and then go to the outside for the turn in there. But this thing here would be endlessly difficult to manage, because all of a sudden this is like, it was that 60-degree corner or something like that. Now where the car would be facing, we'd suddenly have a 65-70-degree corner ahead of us, and we definitely don't want to do that. Plus, we have all the issues with the Porsche and all the other cars as well, that they do get more sensitive under braking while turning. So what I'm trying to do here again is build somewhat of a straight braking zone at the edge of the track, and that only works when I'm already on the outside here. So similar to turn one, just staying on the outside, building yourself somewhat of a straight line into the track that doesn't have a straight line itself, pretty much. And again, you can see the brake is not really applied fully, and just for a short period of time, just getting rid of some speed. We're approaching with 207 or something, going down to 170 whatever. So 30 something kilometers is what we're losing on the brake, actually, not that much. Let's try to see what a brake marker could be. And I think in the cockpit you'll see where the track gets darker. That's a good reference. Doesn't work in the night though. So let's try again what actually is visible here as we approach the corner. So again, there's a board on the right. There is a corresponding orange marker on the left. And I think once they align, that might be a good braking point here. And just make sure that by the time you hit the brake, the car's as straight as possible. Okay, you'll likely never manage to be fully straight. There's always going to be some turning, which means the rear is always going to be somewhat loose. But if you turn a lot, the rear is going to be very loose. So we're just trying to make that line as straight as possible, and then we can keep the rear in check a lot better. Okay, and then when we really start to turn for the corner, we want the car back in the neutral state, which means we can't brake too aggressively, because that creates that pitch, that creates additional downforce on the front, makes the car hard to drive. So once we commit for the corner, we actually want to be off the brake here and just roll a bit, fly over the crest, see if we're making it for the curb. And then same thing again. I feel like I could be a tiny bit further to the inside, need a bit slower speed to do a tighter radius, and therefore another tiny tap on the brake here, this time hitting 6-7%. So it's really breathing onto the brake, not much more, just to do an ever so tiny correction to bring the car pretty much a tiny bit further to the inside. And you can tell again, we are cutting a lot across the track here, and this is really the key to Brands Hatch, knowing the track limits inside and outside of the corner, flying across that. And now you can see, very interesting here, let's take the slowest point in the corner is actually after the inside curb. That is very rare, really, but it's also unique to Brands Hatch in this type of corner here, where we are still slowing down through the apex that we have here. Okay, so apex where we are the tightest again, slowest point in the corner slightly afterwards. Let's paint it once more. Apex here, slowest point in the corner somewhere, or let's do the circle, slightly after the inside of the corner. And really take these points when you record your data, okay? And you compare to this data pack in this lap, the race lap, the 23 something. Then make sure your analysis is always about where are you the slowest and where are you the tightest in the corner, right? These points are more important than the actual speed you're carrying. And always go corner by corner, try to find out where is the pro the slowest, where is he the tightest, and try to copy that more than anything. Again, we have to transition quickly, carrying a lot of speed. Now we have to get over to the other side, straighten up with the outside curb, similar to, or not curb, but white line, build a straight line for the braking so the car is easy to handle. Brake marker here, pretty good with that board, or where the ideal line starts to become more black, and then slightly before that should do just fine. Just quickly looking at the data here, the corner is actually not that difficult compared to others. You can, now that you're in the now that you're in the straight line, you can brake quite aggressively initially, and once you start steering and committing for the corner, release the brake more and more and more, and once you're off the brake, you can really go into the steering and demand the grip from the front axle. And then you can see there's a long phase where I have very steady steering angle again, just trying to stay at the maximum grip the front offers me, and the only option available for me to change my place in the corner would be to adjust the speed slower or faster, meaning brake or throttle. And in this case, it was just perfectly fine. I didn't need any correction. Made it to the inside. If we check where the slowest point is, similar here, really to the corner before, the slowest point slightly after the apex. That again here is very much in the middle, and I think it might be more to the inside than you are actually expecting, because again the game allows us to use quite a lot. Let's slow down. And almost the grass there, the curb is really very weirdly shaped. Let's take a closer look, and I urge you, use the F7 camera that I'm using here, okay? Press F7 when in the car, then you get the fly around camera or in the replay. And just take a look where there is track to use. And you go across here, and there's grass, grass, grass. And suddenly someone had the idea, oh, people cut, so we're going to make that more solid. And then, well, then we're going to drive there as drivers, right? Then the curb gets more wide, so of course we're going to drive there. Suddenly the curb gets narrower, so we can't drive there, but still did. And then they were like, well, okay, let's pave this, make it a bit more solid so people can still go around that. So yeah, that's where we're going. Same story on the exit again. Curb is rather wide. Then in three-step fashion, really, the curb gets narrower, right? First step gets narrower, and then there's another step gets narrower. So you still have time to come back onto the track. But you could also just kind of go through the grass. I didn't here. The game would allow you to go to the outside quite a lot. Last corner, and another tricky one. Brake marker, I think, is just that board and ever so slightly before. For you, again, feel free to do 2, 3, up to 5 meters max earlier. That should sort all your issues. But don't go further than that, right? Don't go full board earlier or something. 5 meters is a lot to do different in a racing car. And just looking at the data right away, we are here. And now very interesting corner. Initially, hard braking, a bit of turn-in, bit of a correction as the rear gets loose. At the same time, we release the brake a bit to allow the rear to settle, still reducing speed. And then as we commit into more steering, we almost let go of the brake entirely. I think I even do. Then I check my speed, the car stabilized, and then I'm like, okay, do I make it to the inside or not? Not quite, so let's brake a tiny bit more to bring the car to the inside, reduce the speed a tiny bit more, and then pick up the throttle. Again, I want to zoom in here just to highlight where our main analysis points are. Slowest point in that corner, definitely again after the apex, somewhere here, and the apex, let's say a car length or so earlier, or here with the X. We had the X earlier, right? So just always check how these points are in relation. Is the slowest point before the apex? Is it after? Is it in the same point? Figure that out and try to behave accordingly. I'm trying to give you more points of orientation that you can work with. And then you don't just remember this is a right corner at 130. No, this is a corner where your minimum speed is going to be slightly below 140, 135, 130, something like that. And your minimum speed will be after the apex. That's an additional info. That's what you learn when you learn a track. It's not just which gear you have in a corner. You always turn in from the outside to the inside. It's not a secret. You always brake hard. You always accelerate hard. You always use all the track and all that stuff, right? That's not advice. Advice is when you dissect the corner into different parts and more points to figure out what you actually need to do, where you need to be tight, where you need to be slow. And these are quite different things. Then if you do it like that, if your slowest point is actually after that apex, then you will have it very easy to stay on track at the exit, because now the car doesn't carry as much speed and can easily stay within the track limits. And we're just waiting for the crest to really end, where the car gets a bit light. And once we have kind of passed this very tricky zone there, we can put the power down. And then the corner opens up eventually. So have some faith, keep the power pressed. The corner will open suddenly, and then you have all the space in the world to come back to the inside, which will give you a slightly better lap. But for your actual run to get the license, just stay wide, because you still need to prepare the next corner, right? So don't go to the inside like I did here to gain an extra hundreds on the lap time. And now I'm just going to roll it back before the start of the lap. I'll give you the full lap. I'll shut up, and I hope you get your license very soon. Don't hesitate to come to the Discord and ask questions on LFM or the Popometer Discord. It's linked probably in the description in the channel. There should be links for Discord everywhere. Get the data pack of any car you want to drive. I feel the Porsche is very nice here, especially with fuel. It should be very rewarding to drive. It has great sound. It behaves nicely. You feel in charge of it. So yeah, I recommend that. Porsche, I'll link the data pack as well. And then I wish you a very happy and successful season 11 on Low Fuel Motorsports.